Strive and Thrive is a collection of discussions featuring guests from various fields, focused on guiding entrepreneurs in creating businesses that excel in every aspect: people, planet, and profit. Throughout the series, you can join us, Romesh and Mike, as we explore relevant topics with our guests which can help businesses thrive.
Romesh and I met while I was supporting a client transforming their business, and I needed finance director support and reached out to him and his team. Since then, we've become good friends who share a passion for business and entrepreneurship. If you like today's discussion, then you want to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our latest episode with Paul Shaw. Hi Paul, how are you doing?
Hi Romesh, very well, thank you. Hi Mike, nice to see you both.
Hi Paul.
Hi, brilliant. And we're really glad to have you here today. So Paul's a professional business coach and mentor dedicated to helping small and medium-sized businesses develop sustainable growth strategies. Paul and I are both directors at our local chambers of commerce in Kingston, and I've really enjoyed getting to know Paul, learning from his insights and experience. So looking forward to deep diving into the conversation today.
Hi Paul, welcome and thank you for joining us. Could you give us a brief summary of your journey to date, and then we'll sort of get stuck into asking you questions and you us?
Yeah, absolutely. So first thing to say is I'm old. So I have been working for a long time. My first job was in 1985, and I was a telesales operator at a West End theatre ticket agency. And this is back in the days when computers were brand new. So it was a great novelty to be selling theatre tickets using a computer, which is what we did. So I kind of like to think of myself as the cutting edge of technology in live entertainment in the mid 80s. So I spent a few years there, sort of worked my way up through the ranks. Ended up being one of the managers there, looking after their technology systems. This was in the days when to run a moderately sized call center, we had a basement, the size of a small house, which contained enormous computers. They were 6-7 feet tall, had to be kept in air-conditioned environments. They had disk drives and all sorts of things sort of hanging out the sides of them, and it was a real struggle just to keep the things running day in, day out. But anyway, I did that, and after a while, I moved on, went to Wembley Stadium, Wembley Arena, and I was an event manager working in the box office there for a few years. And from there, I ended up setting up a ticketing business with some colleagues, which we ran. That was we're in the late 90s now. I think our claim to fame was that we managed the Spice Girls tour of the UK in, I think that was about 97. Anyway, that sort of in the end it didn't quite work out the way we wanted it to, and I ended up going to the Millennium Dome in the year 2000. 1999 when I joined, and I ran the ticketing operations there right through to the end of the year 2000. And then, of course, there was nothing else to do after that, so I had to go and get another job, and I ended up at lastminute.com in the early days, so just post the IPO, but money, but we haven't figured out how to spend it yet, so it was a good time to join. And I ran the leisure business for, in the end, I was there for 10 years. And what started off as a relatively small business focused on London to running the sort of the global entertainment and leisure business for lastminute.com. After that, I spent a couple of years at Time Out, just when some private equity investment was coming in, and that was an interesting time. And after that, I needed a bit of a rest, so I became a consultant, initially in the field of entertainment and leisure, and those good things. And but more recently, since 2017, I transitioned to become a business consultant, working with SMEs and owner-operators to help small businesses build sustainable, deliverable, real-world strategy that could help them to grow and to scale, and hopefully to help a lot of business owners sort of achieve their ambition for their business. And I've been doing that ever since. Initially as an owner of a business doctors franchise, and then more recently under my own banner of McCarters Consulting. A couple of side hustles along the way, developing a software business to support restaurants and pubs that need websites in a technologically underserved industry, hospitality. And that's still going. So I do a bit of that as well on the side. And I also work with Kingston University as a lecturer and a facilitator on some of their business courses. That's me in a nutshell.
Wow, a breadth of experience, Paul. I'll come on to how you're working at the moment in your current business and supporting others, because I think that's some of the interesting material. But I think that's been built up from a career of experience across multiple industries, both internally and also running them yourself. The one I wanted to touch on first is you said you set your own ticketing business up at one point. And what was your experience? Was that your first opportunity as a founder yourself? And what was that experience like, and what happened?
Yeah, that was. So it was this. This was in the mid 1990s. So I'd had a career to that point working on the ticketing side of the entertainment business, and over time we developed a number of contacts, and we develop our own thoughts on technology and how to best use technology to sell tickets, fundamentally. Now, my background was running call centers to sell tickets, which is a really, really inefficient way of doing it, because you probably need 25 people in a big room, all running lots of technology. And, most of the time you're selling big events that sell out in a couple of hours. You've got 25 people for a day. You're paying them all a full day's wage, and they've got nothing to do for most of the day because the tickets sold out in the first hour. But you need to have those people there in order to maintain the ticket sales rate. So we looked at that problem. We thought, how can we fix that? And this was in the days when technology was really just coming to bear. And so we happened on interactive voice response systems on the telephone. So this is sort of digitized. It's like a digitized answer phone, really. But what we were able to do was program event details into a system so that when someone rang up to request tickets, we were able to sell them the next available ticket for that event and take their payments. And it was a system that had been used quite a lot in cinema up until this point, but never applied to live events. So we did that, and we had some success. And as I mentioned earlier, we ended up doing the ticketing for the Spice Girls tour. But we made one big fundamental error. And this was a lesson that I learned quite quickly. We developed technology. We were fundamentally a technology business, and we invested a lot in getting that technology to work and to be performant. What we didn't do was to look at what the emerging technology was looking like. And bear in mind, this is the mid to late 1990s. And so we completely missed the birth of the internet. And within 2 years, our technology was completely redundant. And because we'd spent all of our money building this telephone technology, we had nothing left to reinvest into internet technology. We'd had to redesign our entire architecture, all of our systems, and we just didn't have the funds or the backing to be able to do that. And so, unfortunately, the company didn't succeed. But we learned a big lesson there, which is to always be looking over your shoulder, to see what's coming down the the road. And, I think that was the first time I really learned that, to stand still, even in business, you need to be innovating all the time. To move forward, you need to innovate faster than anybody else. And that was a difficult way to learn that lesson.
Yeah, that's interesting the way you articulate it at the end. To learn to innovate. What would you say? We're all going through a similar sort of change right now with artificial intelligence over at your example being the rise of the internet. What's your view on what companies should do at the moment to navigate? Because some companies will be in exactly the same situation right now where they'll be heavily invested. What would be your recommendations for these types of companies?
I think the AI revolution, it's almost too big to just use two letters to describe it, isn't it? I mean, it is, it's going to change everything. It's going to change the way we work. It's going to change the way we behave. We were saying in the green room earlier, it's going to probably change the way we're educated and the way we prepare our young people for the world that's coming. And we've barely begun to scratch the surface of it. And I mean, I can pretty much guarantee that in a year's time, the AI technology will have advanced so much further than it is today that we'll be having the same conversation again and not really knowing the answers. So, but I guess with the kinds of businesses that I deal with, it's very much around how can we use AI technologies to help us to automate some of the processes that we are having at the moment. How can we use it to reduce our costs and increase our efficiency and give us the headspace to think about what else we can do with it? And at the moment, I think we're all fighting a bit of a rearguard action, particularly in SME world, where we know all this stuff is there and it's around us, and it's bamboozling. It's there's so much potential, but it's very, very hard for any of us, and I count myself in this number. It's very hard for any of us to actually understand how to harness this in such a way as to give ourselves an advantage. And I mean, I don't know if you guys have, come across this in your experience of working with businesses, but I think there's a lot of confusion there right now. And the people that are doing well are the people that can kind of, cut through some of the noise and offer meaningful guidance and advice and support on how to actually use these technologies. And I use the plurals deliberately, because I think, it's reductive to just say AI, isn't it? It covers so many things. And there's so many different varieties.
We've talked about this a lot on a few of our episodes recently, and I know Romesh is investigating for his own purpose, as I am, because it's part of what my core business does. But we found the word adaptability being the word that senior leaders, SME leaders, solopreneurs, really understanding you've got to work out how to adapt. You've got to work out what it means. I think the companies who will struggle are those who stand still and wait for the technology to settle as if it will happen. I'm not convinced that we're in that state at the moment. I think we're in a continual evolution, and you've got to follow the path, and you've just got to work out how you do that for your business. And it will be different for every business, but it's find what works for your business. What's your view on this, Romesh? I know you're experimenting right now. How are your experiments going?
Look, I think Paul made a really good point just now. There's so much to take in, isn't there? There's so much change. AI offers so much possibility that it's a case of distilling it into effective possibility for you. And I think to that end, I think it's trying things, but not being so distracted with trying things that you're not actually focusing on your core proposition and what you need to do to kind of keep your business kind of working well. I think we've got to stick to core principles while, giving ourselves time. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to focus on running my business effectively whilst dabbling, trying new things, and gaining new insights into what AI can do, and then evaluating how I can apply them with purpose. And if I can't, then I think I need to move on because there's a myriad of other things to do and try as well. So it is difficult in that sense, because something we've talked about very recently. We had a chat with Alex Brooker, and it's that so what. So AI can produce lots of stuff, but what does it mean? How is that going to change the game for you or for your business? So that's kind of, I think, dabbling, getting stuck in, but not letting it take you away too much, because you can get stuck, I think.
I think you hit it on the head. And when you say apply it with purpose, I think that's really important. We were talking in the green room earlier, Mike, about education, how AI would affect education, and you made a really good point around it's about how you apply it to problem solving. And if young people can be taught to solve problems in inventive, creative ways, then that's a great way to educate them. And I'd extend that advice to any small business owner thinking about AI tools. What problem do you want to solve? And if you start with the problem that you want to solve, and then start to look at, well, what are the tools that are available to me? What are the options? And go through that. And once you've decided on what your preferred option is, then apply that with purpose. Then you may not become the AI expert overnight, but you will have gone a long way to understanding its uses and its potential, and where else potentially you could apply it as well. So I think it's the old African saying, isn't it? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You start off with a single bite and then see where it takes you.
And it's interesting, Paul, because you use the word tool, right? And I think that's exactly the key point. AI is a tool, but you need to guide it. You need to give direction and give it the purpose, the problem it's trying to solve. And without that, it doesn't really mean anything. And Mike, how are you dealing with this scenario? And you're the innovations man, so you're right on the frontier, really. Yeah.
So I'm experimenting with some frontier models and to see what they can do and what the capability is. And I've seen some really impactful use cases and game-changing opportunities. But where I see it most is in informing people have to change their workflow. When the internet was created, you will have seen this. It's why your previous business struggled. Is it fundamentally changes workflows? You're not trying to speed things up in the way you've always done things. That's kind of old school thinking. You've got to think about what you're doing in a different way. What will happen if this occurs, and how can we operate our businesses in very unique or different ways? Automated quotations and things like that. What does that mean? What, you're no longer doing sales? But if you do that, you're no longer talking to customers. What does that mean? And so you've got to really think about what the kind of automation versus change in processes would be, and where the value sits in the kind of role that you're doing. To Romesh's point, there's a golden thread of your organization already. What is that? And how can you still apply that in a novel way? I think one of the other points that I thought you really articulated well, Paul, when you gave your story about your company, was how you didn't see the signals of the internet coming. And I think that's one of the other areas right now that I'm curious about, is how businesses keep a watch of what's going on, as well as try and do experiments and tests. And I think at the moment, it's a prime example of really having a lens out there. What do you think, based on your experience in that role, what was your learning as part of that exercise where you didn't see it coming? You must have seen it coming. You just didn't really act quickly enough. Or what was the kind of experience at the time that made it suddenly hit you and you weren't in a position to adapt?
I mean, I think there are always a lot of factors at play when you're a founder, not least of which is that you have tunnel vision to a certain extent. You are driven by the model that you're creating and the customers that you are looking to find and the problem that you're solving, and and all of your energy and effort goes into that, and it's all internal. You're not looking at the outside world very much, except in order to find potential customers or collaborators, and so on. So being aware enough to actually notice that these other things are happening outside of your control, I think, is really, really important. And now I'm a consultant, I always say to people I work with, put together a risk register. And a risk is not something that you can control. A risk is something that is going to happen whether you like it or not, regardless of what you think of it. And in order to put together a risk register, therefore, you need to look outside, and you need to look at what's going on in the world around you. And that might be technology, that might be societal, it might be economics, it might be legal or regulatory. There's all sorts of different ways in which something can come up and bite you on the backside. And it will do that more often than not if you're not expecting it. So if you spend a bit of time figuring out what the risks are, how likely they are to happen, and what the impact would be if they were to happen, and you start to build a plan. And that's the thing we didn't do. And, looking back now, it's kind of, it was a cardinal sin, really. But we were so focused on delivering our solution to our customers that we dropped the ball. And I think it was as simple as that. So I guess the lesson is, always be aware of the world around you. And in this day and age, that is a very, very time-consuming job, because, as we said, with AI, things are changing at lightning speed all the time, and to keep abreast of what's happening is extremely challenging. But as a founder, you absolutely have to do it.
I've seen some really good examples of companies that have done this. I think Chris Wilson often talks about a periscope time, stopping, looking up, looking out, looking around, looking back, looking forward, and just pausing and reflecting. But you use the word risk register. I've also seen more of noise around scenario planning now, really thinking about what is going on, what happens if. So, there's all sorts of external factors, to your point, in risk that you can't control. But what happens if they do occur? What can you do about it? And what things, therefore, do you need to keep a closer eye on in terms of trends, behaviors? And we're talking about AI here, but we're not. We're talking about economic situation, employment rights, permissions, customer behavior. We're talking about loads of different factors that you can't control outside your core business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I work with lettings agent who has, is now dealing with the Renters Reform Act
policy change
and the impact that that's having on his landlords. And he had to plan for a year, pretty much, in advance of that bill becoming an act, to develop information sheets, to speak individually to landlords, to do his own due diligence and investigation into, scenario planning in the event that a landlord may want to sell their house. Then how will we help them with that? How will we turn that loss into an opportunity? Does that represent an opportunity to get into sales, become a sales agent, for example? And so all of these things, again, it was legislative change, nothing to do with technology, but a massive impact on the business model. And so he was able to turn that risk into an opportunity by forward planning. And I think that's, it's a really good example of how a small business can do that, because you have got more manageable risks if you're a small business as well. I think your business well. There are fewer moving parts, and it's therefore a little easier to predict what might happen and how you might respond to it.
I do think I do think AI is the current big word, but I think it's manifesting it in a changing landscape for businesses at the moment, which are policy changes, they are macroeconomic changes, global changes, trends. I think these factors are changing around businesses a lot faster than ever before. And it's how your business and the domain that you work in needs to reflect and adapt to that. I've seen some really interesting companies that are pending legislation change, and they're just waiting for that change, and they're just about breaking even. But if that policy changes, the success is already there. And I'm saying to them, what happens if it doesn't?
Yeah.
How are you going to keep your business sustainable? How are you going to maintain those kind of changes? So I think it's the changing landscape that we're really talking about, and how organizations should adapt to it.
Yes, and in certain, it's not just organizations, but sectors can be really adversely affected. I mean, I do a lot of work in the hospitality sector, and with pubs and restaurants in particular, and they have just been hit by one thing after another, starting with COVID, then the energy crisis, then minimum wage increase because they employ a lot of people on minimum wage, national insurance contributions, rise in the cost of raw materials, scarcity of foodstuffs, particularly immediately after COVID, societal shifts, meaning that fewer people want to go to the pub of an evening or can afford potentially to go to a pub of an evening, and the spiral effect that has, the fewer people that can afford to go, the more they have to charge for their drinks and food, the more they charge for their drinks and food, the fewer people can go, and so on. I mean, I think I saw a stat the other day, I think 30% of pubs that existed in the year 2000 no longer exist. 30%.
That's crazy stat, isn't it? Because I remember even, before then there was a lot of talk about, pubs closing down, generally speaking anyway. So the fact that it's from 2000,
exactly.
that's incredible.
But those that have survived, I mean, I have nothing but respect for people that can still make a decent living from running a pub, because not only have they had to deal with all of these headwinds that have been thrown at them, one thing after another, but they have, throughout all of that, they've remained, to your point, adaptable, agile, flexible, creative, and they have been able to maintain a way of keeping their businesses running, and in many cases, making them profitable in spite of all of that. And I think it's an extraordinary sort of testament to the tenacity and agility of small business owners that they can do that.
In fact, that's the strength of small businesses, isn't it? Really, the fact that they have the opportunity, if they've got the willing to do it, they've got smaller businesses. That's the strength. You can change, you can adapt, and you can do it quicker, faster than the bigger organizations.
Yeah.
I think we've discussed before that's why the likes of, the big tech firms invest in incubators and smaller businesses, because they've lost the ability to be that agile. So they have to kind of pay for that. Never forget, as a smaller business, as an SME, that you have that ability to adapt, and if you can lean into it. But I think what we're saying really is try and make, the whole adaptability achievable. To your point, Paul, don't try and eat the whole elephant. Bite-sized chunks, make it manageable, and if you can do that consistently, do the best you can. That's all you can do, and you can't control the future. You shouldn't try to predict everything that's going to happen, but being aware of what might happen gives you more of an edge.
Yeah, I think it's the power of strategic thinking, and being aware that you don't exist in a vacuum. You exist in the wider world, and the wider world has a habit of throwing curveballs at you. And the more you prepare for those, the better the outcome is likely to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Paul, going back a little bit in your journey, you've seen a lot of disruption with big changes going on, and one of those big changes in your career was actually a business that you were working in being acquired by new owners. And so you've worked in an environment where you've had incoming investors, private equity background. How did you find that experience?
I think there's always enormous change when a company changes hands. So I remember when I was at lastminute.com, and the original founders sold out to Sabre Holdings. It's a big American travel business with lots of different subsidiaries, and the atmosphere of the business changed overnight. The expectations of the new owners were very different to the expectations of the founders, and way of working was very different to the founders' way of working as well. And there is always this period of I suppose it's a honeymoon, but it's not a very nice honeymoon. I mean, it's the worst honeymoon you could ever imagine going on, where the two sides are trying to get to know each other and trying to understand each other's ways of working and trying to sort of impose, I guess, their own way on the other. And of course, the incoming owners are always the ones that win. And so culturally, it can be an extremely difficult time for a business that is learning to adapt to new ownership and new expectations. And of course, the other thing with private equity, so Time Out was bought into by private equity when I was there. In fact, I went in with the private equity people to help sort of transform the business. And the thing with private equity, of course, is they want to flip the business in typically in 3 years. And so everything has to happen at double quick pace, whether you like it or not. And that can be very challenging because, very often some good things that take a bit longer to percolate and to rise to the surface will get jettisoned because they just don't fit the time frame. And so you end up with you quite often end up with a business that's lost its way a little bit, unless it's very, very sensitively handled. And I don't know what you guys think, because you've had some experience of this as well, but how many successfully executed private equity buy-ins have you witnessed?
That's a good question. Mike, do you have any thoughts on that? I can give you my view.
I'll be honest, I haven't had any direct experience, but the individuals I've spoke to are those who spent time finding the right private equity investment, and they've developed a longer term relationship, and it's about the longer term success of the business. I think what you're describing there is either a turnaround or a founder exit. And in those circumstances, then it's a different model completely, isn't it? That's then indoctrinating a new way of working onto the business. The examples I know where it's worked, it's been a long-term strategic relationship with those investments, and they've helped the business both survive those roller coaster rides, and they've also understand the end game and the purpose, and they're therefore there for the long term rather than the quick flip, which is, I think, has got to be a risky. It's a financial game then, right, rather than a cultural or organizational purpose one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a distinction as well, I guess, between venture capitalism and private equity.
Private equity.
And yeah. I certainly have found VCs that I have known and worked with to be far more accommodating, supportive, flexible, agile than private equities that I've worked with. And I don't know if that's just my experience or if it's something that's quite common.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I think Paul, you're right. An incoming owner is always going to win. If there is a battle of sorts, that's always going to be the way. But actually, I think that the situations which work best are when, to Mike's point, that there is a slightly longer term view, rather than looking for super quick wins, because that level of change is very difficult to manage, and you can quickly lose the room, right? You can lose the motivation, you can lose a lot of knowledge very quickly if team members of an acquired business decide to leave because they're not happy with an incoming culture. So I think there has to be a balance, I think, for it to work well. And I think what I would say is the PE firms that do their research, it's the due diligence, right? So it's understanding, not just the numbers, but the culture, the values, and does that resonate, and does it fit the model that the PE firm is looking for as well. And I sometimes think that there isn't enough emphasis placed upon that during the due diligence process, because sometimes you get a cultural fit which is completely almost at right angles with the intended direction of the acquisition. That can be really, really problematic. So I've seen it work well. I've seen it work badly, and I've been on both sides. I've worked at a FTSE 100 business where we were very acquisitive, and I've seen businesses being wrapped in. And to do that well, I think, you do need to adapt. You do want ultimately things to progress smoothly and in the strategic direction of the acquirer. But then I guess the challenge to the acquirer is, have you done your homework, and have you chosen the right target, to acquire in the first place? So there's lots of things. And one thing I have noticed is the impact it has on people. Because people are scared of change, I think, naturally, and it's a big change when you have a new ownership, especially if it's like, for example, a family-run, founder-led business that has grown in a certain way over a number of years, and often has operated maybe, say, in a family kind of way, a bit more kind of trusting, informal. And then if you have a very kind of corporate shift quickly, that can be quite jarring, and that's a different difficult scenario. So there's lots of factors to take in, but I think the key is, for me, is both sides doing their homework, because the other aspect that I've not mentioned is actually how, if the existing owners stay in the business for a period of time, however long that is, they need to understand they don't control the business anymore. And I think that's a very, very difficult journey, personally, almost without exception. Because possible.
I would say, my experience of owners, that's very true. But I mean, you've got to, the stars have to align in all sorts of different ways. You've got to align on objectives, you've got to align on cultural fit, you've got to align on timings, you've got to align on financial realities and managing cost bases. There are so many moving parts that it's very, very difficult to get right, which is why I guess it's quite uncommon to come across really successful private equity buyouts, or potentially any merger is going to face the same issues, isn't it?
I suppose it depends how you define success, you see, right? So potentially from a private equity perspective, if they've got a certain time frame, they do what needs to be done from their perspective, and then make a return that fits their model. Then for them, that's a success. For the business itself, that may not be a success. right? Depending on the position it's in at the end of that process. So yeah, I think success depends on perspective as well. Yeah.
I guess the turnaround at Time Out, that must have been an interesting experience though, right? Because Time Out has a strong value proposition, but I imagine I'd be curious to know what the situation was at a turnaround in that type of organization, because there's an example of a strong value proposition that for whatever reason you had to come in and shift everything, right?
Yeah.
Was there a need to shift everything, or was it just the value proposition was strong and some fundamentals need shifting? What was your experience there?
No, there a lot needed changing in at Time Out. I mean, it was it was a very, very strong, established, well thought of brand, particularly in London. But I mean, it had subsidiaries and franchisees all around the world. But it failed to, actually coming back to my point around, looking at risk, it failed to adapt to the digital world and still live very much in a printed magazine era. And so it was definitely a case of sort of faded grandeur, but a very, very strong value proposition still. And I think the bet that private equity made was, if we can transform this incredibly strong, well thought of brand that still commands an enormous amount of loyalty into a compelling digital proposition, then we're sitting on a gold mine. And we think we can take this international, and we think that we can diversify it into all sorts of different areas like travel, and really build, a hugely strong brand. And, to a certain extent, that has been the case. I don't think that the Time Out brand is as strong as it was in its heyday in the 80s, but it's still going. Like lastminute.com is still going. I mean, but they're probably not as, if you spoke to a young person, a 20-year-old person, you said lastminute.com or Time Out, they'd probably look at you slightly strangely and go, what is this old guy talking about? They're not household names in the way that they used to be, but they still, they still do what they say on the tin, and they have, and to that extent, Romesh, to your point, how do you define success? To that extent, those efforts succeeded, but I guess they could have been so much more, right? I mean, that's the question. The what if. We could do what ifery here, but I think.
What was your experience with lastminute.com afterwards? Because obviously it was really innovative at the time. I know it as quite innovative, but now it's, as to the point, it's probably still succeeding. They're probably doing okay with it. But did it lose the essence of lastminute.com at the point of handover, and therefore it kept what it recognized as value, but lost the kind of essence of a really innovative company trying to test new ideas as the internet was ballooning?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the whole thing about lastminute.com at the time, when it was founder-led, was we move fast, we break things, it doesn't always work, we don't care, we're just going to innovate, we're going to try new things, and it'll stick more often than it misses, and therefore it's worth doing. When Brent and Martha, the founders, exited, and they did exit at slightly different times. Brent stayed on and worked through his earn-out period, which I don't think he enjoyed very much. But when they exited, the whole approach changed, and it turned from being a business that could turn on a sixpence and move fast and be agile and innovate and do lots of new stuff to a juggernaut that had a 100-mile turning circle. It was very slow. It was very ponderous. Everything had to go to America and be talked about and be considered in the context of the wider business. And I think at that point, it lost whatever spark it had that got it to the point that made them want to buy it in the first place. I think, the irony is it never made any money. I mean, I mean, they made a lot of money when they sold it, but the business itself never turned a profit when it was founder led. And it was just, but it was a unicorn nonetheless, because it was recognized as an incredibly strong value proposition. But unfortunately, I think they, as is often the case, and I'm sorry if I sound cynical about PE, but I think they killed the golden goose. Really, I think the thing that made it special was the thing that died the day they sold it.
So
that's always the tricky thing, isn't it, with incoming new owners? Do they get it? Yeah. And I don't think they did. And a lot of that is because startups are a reflection of the personalities and the hunger of their founders. And once those founders are no longer there, that just goes, because there's nobody to replace it. Nobody cares as much as the founders do. That's a fair point.
And I guess wearing the PE hat in that sense, they're trying really to pull through the value as they see in the business. And actually, they've got to recognise that the founder leaving is a big loss to the business. The learning for us on this is they're different businesses. Once they get handed over, you have to accept they're different businesses. The founders I know who've exited, who've sold out, have gone, it's an emotional journey. I'm out. I have to learn that I've let it go. And it will be different, but in the next phase. And the person who's bought it goes, I'm going to change it, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Because that's the nature of this transaction. You're kind of evolving that business experience. And I think that's the truth, I guess. You can't assume that the essence of lastminute.com, for example, which at the time would have been a fascinating experience for you to work there and quite a novel business, without those two individuals, it probably would have struggled anyway.
Yeah, I think it would. I mean, I think in the end, it was probably, ironically, it was undercapitalized for some of the challenges that were facing the online travel agency world at the time, and it got slightly blindsided by Booking.com and Expedia, who ended up innovating faster. And the buyers, the company that acquired lastminute.com, they didn't really care about the stuff that made lastminute.com what it was. In the early days, they cared about having a European brand for their travel business, and lastminute.com was kind of the one that was available, and that more or less fitted their model. And so, to your point, Romesh, the buyers probably thought, this is working out quite well. We've got a nice brand in Europe. It's doing okay. We're building a business. But for those that were from the lastminute.com side, it was a very different story, because all of the things that attracted us to the business in the first place started to evaporate and go away. And we ended up working for a very different kind of business to the one that we joined. And I think that's often the case, I think, when these mergers and acquisitions take place.
Yeah. And it's hugely emotional, isn't it, for all parties involved, particularly I think the sellers, the founders, the owners who are exiting, because I think there's the stress of negotiating a deal, because these things often are not, it's not a case of, hey, here's my business, this is what it's worth, I'll have a check, please. It's it's often way more complicated than that. You mentioned earnouts, Paul, and I've been part of a process of evaluating earnouts per post-acquisition on the buyer side, and I could see the stress. In the leadership team, the guys who were in a position to gain from the earnouts, as myself and a couple other people were assessing the validity of the earnouts and how they were doing. It's tough. And so there's the complexity of finding someone who's going to buy your business, who's going to buy it at the value you want to buy it for, who getting an exit that's as clean as possible. There's the emotional burden of what about my team that's got me there? Staff. That it could be a young team that's worked really, really hard for a couple of years. It could be like a family-owned business where for 20 years or so they've been gradually building something. So there's different scenarios, but I think most founders will have a real loyalty to their team, and they won't have control as to what happens to them. And they'll try, but they ultimately won't. And then layer in, as I mentioned before, the fact that some founders do need to stay within the business for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And invariably that's very, very difficult. When you've created something, you've owned it, you've been the boss, and you've run things a certain way, and then suddenly, you're there, but you're acting, really, really following orders. That's very difficult. And I've seen founders in that situation who've taken a long time to accept that, and it's been really difficult for them.
I've worked with founders that have never accepted that.
There you go.
I've spoken to a few of them.
Yeah. So there's a lot of food for thought there, isn't there? There's a lot. But Paul, moving on with your journey, you've then you've gone into the world of consulting and coaching, and I'm sure that's given you a different perspective on the world. And do you enjoy that?
I do. I think the thing I probably enjoy most about it is that when you're working for a large business, you'll do a lot of stuff, and it'll feel really important at the time, and you'll be trying to make big change, but that change happens really slowly. And sometimes you'll work on making change, and then it will be, jettisoned for whatever reason. It's no longer a priority. It doesn't fit with the business's new set of objectives or whatever it is. And so, there can be a lot of frustration. Whereas I think when working with small business owners, medium-sized business owners, when you make a change, you see the change. You see the change happen. You see the impact that it has and the effect it has on the people involved and their customers. And I find that extremely rewarding, because it's not really something I had a great deal of direct experience of when I worked in larger businesses. So that's, I think, the biggest thing for me, and the thing I enjoy most about it, feeling that I can actually help make a difference to the people that I work with. That's extremely, extremely gratifying. But also, I think quite a lot of the lessons you learn in the corporate world can very easily be applied to the SME world as well. So, we talk quite a lot about, sales and acquisitions and mergers and so on. And I've helped a few small business owners sell their business, and I've helped one or two of them buy businesses. And the lessons I learned in lastminute.com and at Time Out have come in extremely handy, working in the SME world. And very much around, as we've talked about, aligning on objectives, making sure that nobody feels that they are being taken advantage of in any kind of deal, that there is genuine value on both sides of the equation, so that everybody feels like the deal is a good one and there's no resentment there at the end of it. And I think getting those balances right, I owe a lot to my sort of corporate, entertainment leisure background, to make sure that we're thinking about the right things when we go through those kinds of transactions and deals, and also what to look out for. What are the sort of the red flags and the challenges that you've got to make sure that you've figured out how to deal with. So I think it is it's a very different way of living. There are a lot of things that I've had to get used to moving out of corporate life and into consultancy. But I do enjoy the fact that I can see the difference I make.
Brilliant. That's really good. Mike, how have you found consulting?
Yeah, I really enjoy, like you, Paul, and I get to, my role's different. I work with large corporates, I work with government, but I also work with SMEs. And I see threads of the same across all of them, which you've just nicely articulated. But I also see a lot of sort of slightly different challenges in early founders or smaller SMEs. And I think when we work with those, I find it the most rewarding experience, as you've talked about it, in the sense that you're really trying to understand the person behind what they're trying to do in this environment and what is suitable for them. That, I'd say, the founder and the person is as important as the value proposition in some of the smaller SMEs that we're really talking about here. What would you say you're seeing as a current trend in SMEs? You mentioned the food industry being really tricky, but have you seen any other trends in terms of industry at the moment for SMEs and good practice and things that people should be considering?
Well, certainly, as we've touched on, there is a kind of a race to automation. There is a sort of a sense out there that AI is the sort of the solution to all ills, as well as being the potential cause of a bunch of them as well. So I think a lot of businesses are now looking at their operations, looking at their workflow, looking at their levels of efficiency, looking at their staffing levels, unfortunately, and looking at ways in which they can improve their efficiency through automation and use of AI tools. So I think that is a growing trend, and also we see a lot of. Sorry, go ahead.
Do you see it as a no, I was just going to ask. Do you see it as a trend because they're trying to drive more profitability, or they're having to do it to adapt due to the need to find ways of cutting costs, particularly with increased labour cost rates, things like that? Is it a need, or is it a creative opportunity?
I think it's a bit of both, to be honest. I think, and it depends very much on the business and what they do as to what the imperative is. But I work with a few businesses that are just looking at it a bit like you, Romesh, and sort of saying, oh, okay, I get the potential of this. I need to understand it better, and I can see how it could improve my efficiency when it comes to, I don't know, logistics or operational workflow management. I know, I work with software businesses that are starting to use AI tools to help them with coding or to check their coding, using it to help with customer service issues, to identify common threads or themes with customer service
Good
complaints.
examples.
And to see what tools they can then employ to resolve those. So there are lots of really, really valuable uses that are coming out, and some of those are driven by, oh my God, my competitors are cheaper than me, and therefore they're selling at more competitive rates, and so what am I going to do? But quite a lot of them are just driven by inquisitiveness, a desire to sort of think creatively, and a desire to get ahead of the curve. And every business is, particularly small businesses, they've all got their sort of unique points of differentiation, and they're using these tools to help them differentiate more and to exaggerate those points of differentiation. So I think that's one trend I'm seeing. I think another one is that we are seeing a lot more consultants. There are a lot more people emerging into the market, or businesses emerging into the market in the sort of professional services field, to support businesses in that march towards automation. And I think that's, that we're going to see a lot more of that in the SME world. One thing that constantly amazes me when I see the stat, and it sort of gets refreshed every year, is that I think the latest ones, there are approximately about 5.2 million businesses in the UK, limited registered businesses with Companies House. And of those 5.2 million, around 4.9 million of them are SMEs. And of that 4.9 million, about 4.7 million of them are micros. And that is that's the market that I work in. So it's an enormous market. and it's continuing to grow, and it is kind of the engine room of our economy in so many ways. You know, the big players, the corporates and the tech giants get all the headlines, but it's the SMEs that really drive the economy from the ground up. And you know, the more that we can encourage the growth of the SME sector, and the more that we can encourage entrepreneurship, and the more we give, you know, young people in particular, you know, the tools and the opportunities to give it a try. You know, that's where I think if we can invest in that, and I think that's a trend I'd really love to see developing in the world of work and employment.
Yeah, you're championing something we believe in. Romesh does it much better than me. This is a world he sees really important. He sees the fact that I'm doing it on your behalf, Romesh, to sing your praises, and you'll reflect it back better. But he does a really good job in articulating how SMEs are the backbone of the UK economy, and that actually supporting people for fractional roles, full-time roles, grow a business you want to work for and you want to work in. It's as good a time as any to be doing that.
Yeah,
Come on, Romesh, expand on my bad articulation.
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, we're all banging the same drum here, aren't we? Right? You know, SME businesses are so critical to our economy, to our communities. Actually, they employ the most people. All that kind of good stuff. They're so important. But it's tough. I think it's tough times at the moment. You know, one of the reasons I think these businesses are looking to innovate and automate is not just because of AI, but because there's a need to look at their costs, to manage through this period of uncertainty. And I think, you know, managing your cash flows, managing your costs carefully, and plotting next steps, you know, with real deliberateness is really, really important right now. And you know, Paul, you gave an amazing stat there as to how many businesses fall into the SME category. But you know, one of the stats, which I'm sure we've all heard lots, is, you know, the number of these businesses that do fail. And you know, I think we're all fighting the good fight here, aren't we, to try and ensure that we're doing our small part to actually reduce that. Because a thriving SME world is a thriving society, thriving community, isn't it? That's what we want. Yeah, and Paul, I really appreciated hearing your passion for that. That was absolutely brilliant. And that leads me to my final question, I suppose, on this, which is, you know, that passion that you've shown for the SME world. I've seen it because, you know, we're both at the Kingston Chambers of Commerce, and I know from our many chats that we share a real kind of strong belief in the power of networking. You know, so can you tell us about how networking has helped you, and do you have any tips or thoughts for our viewers and listeners?
Yeah, I think networking is a hugely important form of marketing, particularly for SMEs, because number one, it gets you face to face with your potential audience. Number two, it introduces you to people that may be very close to your potential audience and can refer you to them, or introduce you to other people that you can work with. And I think number three, it gives you that it gives you confidence in what you are doing. It gives you the capability to sort of test your ideas, test your business model against people that you're coming into contact with. It helps you develop your network of contacts. I mean, I met the university through networking. I would say 50% of my revenue probably comes as a result of networking. It is a marketing channel as much as, you know, pay-per-click advertising, or putting out a TV advert, or social media, or anything else. You know, it is a really valuable marketing channel, and depending on what you do, it could very well be your best marketing channel. And you also have the ability to know what works and what doesn't, because you can see the effects of the networking that you're doing, and whether the contacts that you're making are bringing you business or not. And so I've been networking, more or less professionally for the past 9 years. When I started as a business coach, I went to every event going. I mean, I was probably networking 2 times a day, every day of the week. I've toned it down a bit now, because you learn what works and what doesn't. But I thoroughly recommend networking. And I think, I wouldn't have met you, Romesh, if I hadn't been networking. So, there's a justification for it right there.
Too kind, Paul, too kind. But yeah, I agree with that. And it's creating opportunities, isn't it? Whatever that might be. And if you're there listening and trying to help others, that I think kind of puts you at the forefront of people's minds. If something, in your field comes up that, I remember, Paul helped me out with something I was struggling with, he'll be a good person to recommend. And I think that is a really good way forwards. And gosh, 9 years, I'm going to have to tap your brains more on what's worked for you and what hasn't. And, lots more to kind of delve into there another time, I'm sure. But listen, I think we've probably come to the point where we need to start wrapping up. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, Paul. Thank you for sharing all of your experience and insights and your stories, your war stories over the years. Mike, what are your key takeaways today?
I really like the deep dive on lastminute.com and Time Out, and thinking about the implications of takeovers and what that looks like, because it's often founder exit is something we've touched on quite a few times, and this conversation's taken it to a different level and seen the retrospective implications on that and what that means for the business, and to go in eyes wide open to those kind of impacts, which I think are important for any founder looking to exit their business. I also think the touch on thinking about the risks, you used the word risks, Paul, and I'll take that word, is the risks to your business, and actually looking out and really spending the time working out what they might be, and be brave enough to explore them when you can, because if they hit you, it will be too late.
Absolutely. And to add to that, I totally agree, Mike. Thanks. That's a really nice summary. And I really enjoyed our chat on how to kind of purposefully use AI as well. I thought that was a really, really, really good discussion. Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you again, Paul, for joining us. I'd like to thank all of our brilliant. I'd like to thank all of our listeners and followers very much. We're very grateful to Paul and for you guys for all of your support. We hope that you like what you're hearing. Do get in touch and give us feedback. We want to get better, and if you'd like to support us, tell a friend who's interested in business about our podcast. And I really hope you can join us next time. Cheers. Thank you for listening to Strive and Thrive.